47 minutes before 8. Now, according to the United Nations, before 9 that should be, according to the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, or UNICEF, the education of millions of learners in remote areas who have no electricity, let alone access to the internet, is lost during this lockdown as they cannot access online learning. Now, the organization says it will be partnering with various institutions to support the most vulnerable learners, and they will use radio as a means of reaching them. And joining us now is the Chief of Communications for UNICEF in Eastern and Southern African region, James Elder. Thanks so much for speaking to us this morning, James.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
James, I think first and foremost, this of course speaks to the stark inequalities between the haves and the have-nots, especially here at the southern tip of Africa. But please explain to us how UNICEF intends to teach children, and especially those who do not have access to the internet during this period.
Yeah, you're spot on. Hey, education for the last 50 years has been that great equaliser. It's a chance to move up socially mobile manner, and we're losing that chance now with so many millions of kids out of school. So whilst there is that access for kids to do online learning, there are great classrooms there, a lot of schools going digitally. We also know that, broadly speaking, across this part of the world, 4 in 5 kids don't have an internet access at home. Now, that's not that bad in South Africa, more do, but we still know millions of children. If you're relying on being online, they are simply locked out of any virtual classroom. Radio forever has been that means of getting messages to people in the most marginalised areas, the most remote areas, the poorest areas. So we're working with governments, we're working with businesses, and we're just trying to get the curriculum online. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Kids don't have to do 7-8 hours a day, but a few hours each day. Keep that learning going. Give parents a break, reduce some of the stress in the home, and give kids a chance so they don't miss months and months of school.
So our apologies once again for the break in connection there to James Elder from UNICEF. But James, if you can hear me now, I was just wondering, for which grades are you intending to use this radio medium? Is it in the main primary school education, or how exactly will you cover the curriculum, and which grades will it cover?
Yeah, it covers all, but mostly it will cover those children in primary schools. That's the focus area, but we know how important it is for those kids who are in grades 10 and 11 and getting into their final year. So we're looking at covering all kids in the same way that we're trying to generally talk to governments about slowly starting to look at, once they can ease containment measures, schools would be a first thing. And again, the same way that radio can only reach a limited number, then slowly, you start to look at splitting up days, making sure kids go into classrooms that aren't overcrowded. Everything needs a context. There's no one size fits all. But right now we know that those millions of kids, they need some solution, and radio's probably it.
And as you say, there's no one size fits all because there's going to be quite a bit of innovation that needs to happen here, because if you think about certain learning outcomes at the foundation phase, like if you look at numeracy and you're trying to simply teach road counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's okay. You can teach that quite easily over the radio. But when it comes to actually teaching a child to write, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, there's certain things that are just so difficult, and that's where we hope as well that parents can take a role. But I know that the stress, obviously I haven't been in South Africa recently, but I know those communities here in Nairobi where 5 or 6 people are living in the space of what some middle-class people might have as a kitchen. So there's a lot of stress there, and because of that, we're seeing secondary impacts. We're seeing violent increase and so on. So whilst there's a role for parents, there's stress on communities, and we hope containment measures will ease. And in the interim, we hope that mums and dads and caregivers can get those radios and get a few hours where kids can just be by themselves in a safe place and do a little bit of learning. Because you're right, studies have shown that you miss 3 or 4 months of maths or English or your language or mother tongue, it can equate to about a year of schooling. So these are difficult times.
Certainly are. And James, what languages will be used during these radio broadcasts?
Well, first in South Africa, first and foremost, they are using English, but I know SABC will also have some in many other tongues. Here where I am in Kenya, for example, they'll use Kiswahili, they'll use other national languages, they will use English. So it will depend on the community radio station that's taking that curriculum forward. So that's a really important part. A lot of the stuff UNICEF does on radio is really in that national language. I know that a lot of people know that English can be the language that links country to country, but most people have a mother tongue, but English is their second or third language. So a lot of it will be in that mother tongue. Again, the whole point of this is to reach those most vulnerable.
Well, James, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. But thank you so much for your time this morning. And that is UNICEF and James Elder is Chief Communications Officer with UNICEF in the Eastern and Southern African regions, talking to us there about some of the efforts they plan to bring about as to how they will assist youngsters who don't have access to online learning to not lose out completely. And as he says, they're going to be using radio and, of course, much more thinking is going to have to go into mother tongue instruction, especially at the foundation phase. But let's park that there for the time being and take a quick break.